thank you all for being here. This is not an easy topic, and we have a pretty aggressive agenda today. But make no mistakes, we're here to talk about death and death that can be prevented. We've got a lot of information to share with you, but as you all know, we're in an epidemic. We're in an epidemic here in Montgomery County, in the state of Maryland, and in our country. Last year alone in Maryland, 553 people died by way of homicide, okay? But the overdose rate is almost 5 times the homicide rate. 2,098 people died from fatal overdoses last year. The numbers continue to grow. So we've created a private and public group called Speak Up, Save a Life that consists of Department of Health and Human Services, the Montgomery County Bar Association, the schools, the police department, and the state's attorney's office, and the private sector. And our goal is pretty simple. Our goal is to save lives. This presentation is about saving lives. Our goal is to leave here with you all knowing that the decisions you make can absolutely affect whether you live or die. Many alcohol and drug-related deaths could be prevented, and this could certainly happen to you or anybody. Now, before we get started, by show of hands only, how many people here know somebody that has died directly or indirectly from drugs, alcohol, or prescription drugs and misusing them? Show of hands. Look around, folks. I'm going to guesstimate that's about 60% of the people in this room. All right, for those of you that just raised your hand, how many of you think that death could have been prevented with love, luck, or intervention? Okay, and that's exactly why we're here, because death can be prevented. We need to be aware of the decisions we're making. We need to protect our family members. Right now, there are prescription drugs in your home, some of you, that are expired, that are inappropriate. We need to deal with that because many young people and elderly people are getting a prescription and then they're transitioning from prescription level drugs because now there's an addiction, they transition to street level drugs. And that's why our death and fatality rate is so high. My name is Steve Chaikin, and I was a prosecutor here in Montgomery County for 22 years. One of the things that we saw in the criminal justice system was we saw a lot of young people getting addicted to drugs and giving away their futures and their lives. So we decided that we can't lock people up and think that's going to solve a problem. We need to help people. So one of our challenges here today is for all of us to recognize that there are people out there that we love and that we want to help. We want to identify those people that are suffering from addiction, that are having these issues, and we want to try to get them help. So we have a great panel here today. We have a young person in recovery who's also a substance abuse counselor. We have a parent who's lost a child, a pillar of our community. We also have a police officer here that's going to tell an incredible story. And we're also going to talk about what's the Good Samaritan Law, because you citizens did a great thing recently. You put pressure on our elected leaders, and they passed a new law called the Good Samaritan Law. And in essence, if somebody's sick or overdosing, and you call 911, you have immunity. We've had a lot of people that don't want to make that call. And one of our fundamental messages today is call 911. If you see somebody sick, overdosing, you're not sure, call 911. There are no civil penalties, there are no criminal penalties. If you're using alcohol, using drugs, underage, in possession of illegal things, you have immunity because the government has a compelling interest to protect the citizens from dying rather than to worry about prosecuting somebody for simple possession or being an underage person with alcohol or paraphernalia. The new Good Samaritan Law is a game changer. And we're here to talk to you about a number of issues: medical, legal, moral, educational. And we have a great panel. So at this time, I'm going to bring up the president of Montgomery College before we proceed any further. And I have to tell you, I'm from Silver Spring, Maryland. I attended a senior in high school. I came here to school. I attended college here, and I've taught here as a professor, and I regularly come back. I am home. I think we all think of Montgomery College as a learning place and a gathering place, and right now Montgomery College is leading us to the future by having the courage to talk about these issues publicly, because people are dying at an alarming rate. And now our leader, Dr. Pollard. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
So I should have just let Steve do my welcome to the college, because he certainly speaks with authority about knowing what Montgomery College is and the role that it attempts to play in the communities that we serve both internally and externally. I want to thank you all for choosing to be here today. This is an incredibly important topic, one that is touching so many lives that many of us may not even know about, others of us who've lived through the experiences of family members and friends who've been touched by addiction and the consequences of that as well. I'm pleased to see the panel that is going to speak and the very thoughtful perspectives and lived experiences that they're going to share. I also think it's important in this room as I look around, as I see students, I see faculty, I see administrators, I see staff, because each and every one of us has some connection to this particular topic. So I'm hopeful that we will leave here more connected around this topic. Steve gave you some statistics that I think are fairly compelling. Some of the data I had suggested thousands of folks have died in Maryland from heroin or opioid addiction and overdose. So when I think about that for me, when I hear the number, in some cases 1,500, 2,500, I keep thinking, what does that look like? If I were a full-time student here at Montgomery College who was taking roughly 5 classes a semester, where they may have approximately 30 people in each class, and then I multiply that by tens, and I started to see the number of people who simply disappeared because of an addiction and opioid overdose. That's something for us to think about, because sometimes we objectify these issues and we think them about, oh, that happens to the other. We think about those in terms of numbers that are somebody else. But if you think about your classes, you think about your family, think about the people in this room. If they were simply no longer there because they died due to an overdose of heroin or an opioid, that to me I think means something for us to think about. Losing a family member, a friend, is significant in all of our lives. It's not just something that we have to sit here and think, how did this happen? Because as Steve said earlier, here is something that we as a community can do something about. I'm proud that Montgomery College today is playing this role in hosting this forum, one of several that I think that we'll be doing over the course of the next several years. One is because I think nationally, we know this is an issue. We're getting lots of conversations about the opioid addiction crisis that we see in our community. And we also know that we're not doing enough in these spaces right now to talk about this. So I think that we're all in a position to learn something from people whose lives have been touched by this, people who are deeply invested in our law enforcement community, those who are deeply invested in our addiction community, who are helping our young people and family members and others work their way from these powerful addictions. And also learning from people whose stories indicate that they had family members or friends who were not able to, and how we may think about what that means for us when we interact with our students, with our colleagues, with our friends, with our family members, with our neighbors, because all of these things are happening directly in our community. I'm also proud that Montgomery College is an anchor institution, is deeply invested in this work on our campus. This type of event, compared also with the things we were seeing on our other campuses in Tacoma Park, and also when we had a video there not too long ago called Written Off. We also had an opioid overdose prevention, a training program that we've had here at the college. You see staff here from the college who are here to help talk about the resources that we have available. We've also trained about 20 of the college's safety and security officers in how to use Narcan in such a way to prevent, help in emergency situations when an overdose is apparent. And we're going to continue to advance the work that we're doing at the college in this space. I'm not an addictions expert. The only expert that I am is one who's had a lived experience, whose life has been touched by this. And I think as a result of the work that we do here at college, the students that I get to interact with, my colleagues and my own family, I hope that you all leave here, as I leave from these types of spaces, more informed, more thoughtfully connected, more intentional about how we think about community. All of us have some level of obligation to be intentional about the way in which we create environments that when someone is hurt or is hurting, they know how to ask for and find help. that we have appropriate resources, and if I don't have that resource myself, that I know where I might be able to offer resources. And also, very importantly, how we as a college community are intentional in making sure that we can be of service to our community internally and externally by hosting these types of events, by ensuring that our campus remains a welcoming one and a safe one and a healthy one. Health in the broadest sense of when we think about what we should be doing. Thank you all for choosing to be here today. Thank you to our panelists who are going to offer perspectives I think that can be truly illuminating and hopefully disruptive in our own minds about when we think about these types of issues. And I hope that all of us leave here from this space more informed, more committed, and more engaged around this issue. Thank you so much for being here, and good luck.
It takes courage to lead, and we need leadership. Our community needs leadership. I feel like I want to nominate Dr. Pollard for some higher position to lead our country because it takes vision and leadership. Thank you, Doctor. Now, I grew up around here in Montgomery County, and our state's attorney is John McCarthy. Our chief of police is Tom Major. These are incredible leaders because they've already made a decision to interpret the Good Samaritan Law to save lives. So, for example, if somebody was sick and overdosing, the law says that if you call 911, you have immunity and the overdose victim has immunity. But our chief of police and our state's attorney have taken that farther. If you're in the mode of trying to save somebody's life, you have immunity from the misdemeanors that we've been discussing. Why? Because we need to focus on saving lives, calling 911, and not locking people up. We are not going to arrest our way out of this. So leadership is the key. Today's panel, we have a great panel for you. And what we're going to do is we're going to go soon to our keynote speaker, and then we're going to go to our panel members, and each of us is going to speak for about 10 minutes or so, and then we're going to do a panel presentation with question and answers. So there's a lot of information. If you have a question, I may call on you during the panel, but in the meantime, I'm going to call up our keynote speaker. And I'd like him to start approaching. Retired Lieutenant, I'm going to call him Captain, Charles Chuck Carafano, worked in the police department for half of his life. He retired just 3 months ago. We've known each other well. He's done undercover work. He's done leadership work. He's been a commander. He's led the Special Investigation Division, and he's a family man. How many kids do you have? How many kids?
I have 5 kids, and I have 7 grandkids.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yes. So Chuck Carafano, we also have Jason Kokinos from the police department here, so we've got a lot of support here. Thank you, Lieutenant Retired Carafano.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it, brother.
My brother.
Grandkids are a lot easier. Trust me, you all know that. How's everybody doing? Hola, konnichiwa, mahala. What's happening, homie? I know that guy. So, I think I hit everybody. You know what I love about Montgomery College? I've come here for classes. I love the diversity. I just love our county. I just love the diversity. And what's interesting is a lot of people think diversity means differences, and they want to put you horizontally, like in one side or the other, left, right, for guns, against guns. Everyone wants to separate us. And man, let me tell you something. When you have problems like this, I tend not to think horizontal. I love to think vertical. I like to think that maybe we're here or here, and if we could come together, right, regardless of black, white, all that stuff, we can definitely handle these issues. And I love the fact that diversity really is our identity. And when we put our minds together, we could solve any problem. So give yourselves a hand for, number one, being here and for caring about what we've got going on. Give yourself a hand. Thanks. So I'm going to give you a quick education. I know we're in college, right? So we like education. And knowledge drives thinking, right? It's good. But let me tell you something better, okay? Right? Knowledge drives thinking. Education is good. I can educate your mind all day long, and we will throw statistics and numbers and all that stuff. But let me tell you something. If I can educate your heart, you know what I'm saying? If I could connect with you and I could share maybe a story that drives with emotion, emotion drives action. Knowledge drives thinking, but emotion drives action. So rather than hit you with numbers and statistics, I'm really just going to grab a story, and I want to share with my 32 years law enforcement, right? 17 years as an undercover, unique perspective. Okay, unique perspective. So let me share something with you, but before I even do that, some of y'all are distracted because the question's on your mind, right? The question's on your mind. Everyone, I know the question you're thinking. Who is this amazing-looking man, right? right? I could see it in your eyes. Who's this amazing looking man, and what is he going to share? So, let me take you back many, many years ago when I actually had some hair. It was like a ponytail and the beard. You all seen the movies, right? So I was working undercover, and it wasn't too far from here, actually. We were watching this place where there's a lot of criminal activity. It was a hotel. And I'm not going to tell you the name of the hotel because we still watch it, right? All right, so we're watching this hotel with a red roof, and we're in the parking lot, right? And we see these young folks up in these rooms, and they're going back and forth, like something's going on. So what happens next is they come downstairs, they jump in a car, and they go hauling down the highway. So what do? Y'all know what we do, right? Woo, woo. We pull them over, right? And we walk up, and I'll never forget it, walk up this little Honda, and in there's like 6 or 7 young folks, right? You've been there, you've seen that. And what do? We separate them, right? Because in the car is open containers, right? They have alcohol. And we actually found some prescription drugs. Imagine that, prescription drugs, which they're prescribed, doctors prescribe them safe, right? Right? Well, you all know better. So it was Oxycontin, which we call hillbilly heroin, right? Because what are those pills? Heroin, converted. So we pull these kids out, and I'll never forget it. This young lady in the back seat, I pull her out, because we're going to separate and get their story. And I pull this young lady out, and I'll never forget, I pull her out, beautiful young lady, this red flowing hair and these popping blue eyes, and she smiles with like perfect teeth. And she's like real articulate, right? She's like 17, same age as my daughter, mind you. And then when she starts talking, I'm like, this is a sharp kid. She's an honor roll student at a high school here in Montgomery County. And when I start talking to her, I start doing the dad thing, right? We have parents here or teachers or coaches. We do the same thing. We're like, we're going to educate this kid because she's hanging out with these knuckleheads, right? And I'm like, you got so much going for you. And I start to give her the talk, right? Do you know what happens if you hang out with 2 stupid people? You know what that makes you? The 3rd stupid person, right? And your friends are the prophecy of your future. That's getting pretty good, right? I'm really schooling this girl. And I'm like, don't make a decision today that your future self is going to regret. So I'm about ready to pat myself on the back. I said, I just schooled this girl, man. She's got it from here. So I leave. We end up locking one person up and write some citations for underage drinking. Folks, remember this. 1 year later, same hotel with the same red roof, same parking lot, folks in and out of rooms, come downstairs, jump in the car, go down the highway. What do? Let's hear it. That's pretty, you can make good, you're good. You're like a firefighter or something. That was some other ambulance or something. So we pull them over, and now I walk up, different story. Now I walk up, there's 2 dudes in the front, and they're real nervous. And guess what? They're wanted. And what are they wanted for? Bad dudes, robberies, they got drug dealing. If it's a crime, they probably did it. It was bad. And they were very nervous. We pull them out. They both had handguns, right? So it's a good thing they didn't know they were wanted. So we lock them up, but here's the kicker, right? I go in the back seat. Guess who's back there? Little old Red. I said, Red, get out of the car. Now, Red gets out, and if you could picture this, have a little vision. That beautiful red flowing hair, that stuff is like, right, all matted and just dirty. And then she looks at me, and those beautiful blue eyes now are just these black circles, and she had this glaze. And then that beautiful articulate smile, now I see some drool coming out, and as she's talking to me, she's slurring her words. But the worst part of any of that is when I look down at her arm, and I saw, you guessed it, right, the track marks, and I see blood dripping out of her arm. She just shot up. And y'all are smart people. You know what she was doing for those guys at the motel to be able to afford her habit. Okay? And I asked her, you know, the story. And the story, just like the young lady's video you just saw, just like when you get these statistics of numbers of people, these are actual people. It's pretty much the same story. She was partying with a friend, got hooked on pills, and found out very quickly that the actual powder is a lot cheaper than the pills, right? And then they pool their money, and then she'd go to Baltimore, right, and who did she meet? These guys. So when her parents did the tough love and kicked her out, who was there with open arms to welcome her into their family? These guys. And what's so sad and so interesting when you look at it, this is 1 year, is it wasn't a logical choice for her. It wasn't like one day she woke up, Mom, Dad, yeah, astronaut, accountant, all that stuff. Nah, I want to sell my body. I want to be a prostitute. She didn't make that logical choice. It's not like they have a better dental plan or something. It wasn't like, this is what I want to do with my life. It was a process. And this is what happens to our children and even to some adults. There's a door. And through that door, we know it leads to bondage and slavery, right? We know that. And your kids and my kids, they're all, and the people who are going to talk today, some who have been involved in that, they're sitting in your seat and they're saying, there's no way I'd ever do that. But what do? They go up to the door and maybe there's a window and they look through and they say, hey, my friends are laughing. They're not addicted. They're not in any cycle of addiction. And I'll never go through the door, but maybe I'll take a little look. And then next thing you know, they're like, well, the door's not even locked. Oh, it's open. And maybe if I just open the door and take a peek through, I could see what they're doing because I'm a little curious, right? And the next thing you know, they're like, well, I'll take a step to look around the corner. And I'm more here than I am there. And then next thing you know, the door is slammed shut in their face. And they're banging, trying to get back, right? This is the cycle of addiction, trying to get back. And they spend the rest of their lives trying to get back. So here's the message. And I share that story because I want to share this. If I tell you, close your eyes and don't think of me in a hula skirt right now. Who did it? Who just thought of me in a hula skirt? You're a sick person. No. So if I tell you not to do something, when we're telling our kids, don't do this, what's the first question? Why? Why not? Right? And the logical education is not working. So here's the thought. Instead of telling kids not what to do, they're very smart. So we give them the information, we educate their mind, but we educate their heart, right? We educate them with the stories, and we inspire them to do the things that they're supposed to do here, right? The debt that they have to pay living on this planet is to live their purpose. So I'll finish with this, just a few things. So when we go into these schools and we talk to the young folks, the message is inspiring young folks to do the right thing. Because sitting right here, there's 4 people in this audience today. Four types of people. And you're one or all of these people. And I want you to think a second, which one are you? Are you that person who knows it all? How many of you knew it all when you were a teenager? I was that person. I'm still kind of that person in certain areas, right? Well, the problem with that is they're not open they have that fixed mindset. They're not open to learning. And that's a sad way to be. And I don't say too much about those people because they're not listening. Right? They're not experiencing mentorship, which is learning without all the pain. Mentorship, which is telling you what you need to hear versus just kind of pandering you, and I'm your friend. Friends tell you what you want to hear. Mentor tells you what you need to hear. And those people are closed off. And maybe you're a little bit of that. I know I was. And here's the second type of person, the person that likes to be comfortable. And when we say heroin, let's fill in the blank with any substance. Because think about it. Why is the number 1 chair in America called the lazy boy? I mean, why do most people just want to be comfortable? It's kind of natural. And most people do that. But then you have the kid, right, who's 30 years old now, living in their parents' basement. Nothing against that. I know some of you might be living in your parents' basement. Don't take it out of context. Living in their parents' basement, smoking weed, playing video games, eating McDonald's, doing all this stuff and just existing. And the reason I use that, because every time I'd hit a house when I was in SWAT, that's exactly what I found. Kills ambition, and we could talk about marijuana all day long, but here's the thing. If that's what you want, then marijuana is probably a good drug for you, or fill in the blank. If that's what you want to do is just exist. There are people who die at 25 and are buried at 85, and all they do is exist. Right? Here's another type of person. This is the person that really just does things based on what everybody else is thinking. Right? They're going along, you know it, the peer pressure. They're just going along, and they're just kind of doing everything based on everyone else's opinion. And everyone else's opinion becomes their reality. And then next thing you know is you have, I said the friends are your prophecy of your future. You know it, right? They're hanging out with the 5 people they hang out with. That's what they become. And you all know this because a lot of you have been around and you understand that. Here's the 4th type of person, and that's the winner. Right? That's the one, Superman rips open that big S. It's got the big W. It says, I'm a winner. And that's, every one of us has that. Not everyone achieves that, but everyone has that ability. And these young folks all have these gifts these natural gifts and abilities. And if they would just harness that and find their purpose, man, all substance is going to do is keep them away from that. So last thing, and this is it, and this is the most fundamentally incredible, inspirational thing I've ever heard in my life, and some of you might have heard this already, maybe, maybe not. Let me share this with you, and if this doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what would. Picture right now, we may have, 100 people or so here. Picture the most people you've ever seen in a stadium, Ravens Stadium. Picture all the people in the United States of America, 321, 322, whatever it is. Think of the most people you've ever seen. Now, if you took the 7 billion people in the world, that number still pales in comparison to 1 trillion people, wouldn't it? Well, here's a number I want you to understand. 400 trillion. 400 trillion happens to be a number when the scientists started crunching numbers to see what the odds were of you being born. They found that the odds of you being born is 1 in 400 trillion. What does that even look like? How is that not mind-boggling for you? If you think about it with war, disease, abortion, the fact that some of y'all had to outswim 53 million other folks, and you may not even know how to swim, right, just to get conceived, right? You know those numbers. The odds of you being born is 1 in 400 trillion. What that means is that you're not an accident. If you're sitting here today, you're a living, breathing miracle that was created for a purpose. And if you understand your purpose, you don't need medication. You don't need substance to get over any kind of pain, because a purpose will trump pain every time. So I'll leave you with that. And here's the challenge for the young folks. Here's the challenge for all of us. Do kids want to do you just want to exist? Do you want to be phenomenal, or do you want to be forgotten? Do you want to be the person that they write books about, make movies about, and live your purpose? And happiness is definitely not a destination. Happiness is a decision based on living your purpose. Do you want to be that, or do you want to just exist and be forgotten? So that's the challenge. That's the choice. Choose wisely. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, Lieutenant, Captain, Colonel Chuck Carafano. Thank you. Thank you. We're very lucky to have such incredible resources that come to this college. No one here is paid to do any of these things. We're all volunteering our time. We also want to talk about the cycle of addiction. In between our speakers, as we bring them up, I just want to mention a few things. We had a case recently, not more than 5 minutes from here, where a young person had a job but was selling marijuana. He was robbed and shot and dying and bleeding in his home. His friends did not call 911 because they wanted to hide their small amounts of drugs and they didn't want to get in trouble. They didn't know they had immunity. They didn't think they should call 911. I know this sounds crazy to us. Somebody's lying, dying, and bleeding, and you don't call 911. Well, what we're saying now is you have immunity. And what we're saying is there's different levels of addiction. There's different levels of nonviolent, addiction-driven activities. We have drug court in the court system. We have the mental health program in the court system. We have diversion programs. But you, as the leaders in our community, and make no mistake, if you're in this room, you are a leader. There's somebody that you're leading, and that's why you're here. You're learning and you're leading. But the cycle of addiction, we need to look around. Who's suffering? Who can we help? So to better understand about this cycle of addiction, we have an expert that's going to come up and speak with us. And Andy Gilson, are you here? Andy, come on up, Andy. And if we could give a round of applause for Andy, who's going to discuss the cycle of addiction. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Can all hear me well? Yes? Good. Okay, so as he said, Andy Gilson is my name, addictions expert. Got about, I'd say, maybe 8 years in the field, working mainly here in Montgomery County. I worked as a substance abuse counselor at Avery Road Treatment Center in Rockville, Maryland, which is the main detox facility for Montgomery County. I've worked with adolescents and adults in other settings as well, outpatient settings, and now I am a contractor for the Department of Health and Human Services, and I work for a program called ASAP, which is an acronym. It stands for Adolescent Substance Abuse Prevention Program. And basically what I'm doing with the ASAP program is it's 2 separate 10-week programs. One is focused on substance abuse, like awareness and prevention, and then the other program or other curriculum is focused on developing healthy coping skills and developing healthy coping strategies. So sort of in a nutshell, that's what the ASAP program is, and that's what I do for the Department of Health and Human Services, is I go out into the community within Montgomery County and bring these services to adolescents, to young people, and I do it in a number of different facilities. I'm here today because I was asked to come and talk a little bit about addiction and stages of addiction, which I can, briefly talk about those and go over those. I have a table set up over here with my supervisor. I'll be here for a while afterwards. If anyone wanted to stop and pick up some flyers, information, business card, or ask any kind of questions, that's fine. I'm available for that. So we're looking at substance use disorders, which really kind of affect somewhere around 20 million people in the United States right now. That's just sort of like a rough number. Addiction, which is basically the final stage in the stages of addiction, dependence, addiction, that's sort of the final stage. That stage is defined as addiction being a chronic relapsing brain disease. That's what addiction is defined as. And when someone is in that final stage, they've crossed over into addiction or dependence, meaning that their brain has become reliant on the substance, whatever it is that they have been using. So there's an initiation phase. This is not really part of the stages of addiction, but this is just sort of the first time when a young person or an individual will drink or use a drug. And that could just be an isolated incident. That could just be someone used something one time and said, okay, I'm good. I've got my fulfillment. I've piqued my curiosity. Don't like it. Moving on, and that's it. Now, when we actually start at the stages of addiction, the first stage is drug experimentation. So this is, if you go beyond the initiation, you tried one time, you go beyond that into experimentation, that's kind of defined as the use of alcohol, mind or mood-altering substances. You're using those for experimentation purposes, as it says. Maybe in a setting with some friends. You're not really doing it to necessarily abuse the drug. You're just sort of testing the bounds, seeing what it does. The next stage after experimentation would be if someone keeps experimenting, keeps using, then it would go into what they call social use. That's stage 2. Social use is the use of any drug, alcohol or drugs, where you're using those in social situations for social reasons. Like people now are going out every weekend to drink with their friends so they can have fun and relax and dance, or they're going out and using marijuana or some other type of drug because they want to, feel better, or they want to be able to fit in. They want that sort of social lubricant, they call it. So that's the mark of social use. Now it's gone from just experimenting to I'm using it more regularly in social settings for a social reason, for a purpose. Stage 3, moving ahead, is problematic or what they call risky use. And if I want to just sort of sum that up, it's basically just, does my use of alcohol, does my use of other drugs, mind, mood-altering substances, threaten my safety? Does it threaten the safety of others? That's sort of, again, in a nutshell, what risky use would be. Is this risky for me to use? Is this going to cause a problem? Could this hurt me? Could this hurt someone else? And then you go on to stage 4, and this is what they define as substance abuse. Difference between all these stages. Substance abuse, the characteristic feature is presence of dysfunction related to the person's use of alcohol or drugs. So substance abuse has been described as the use of a psychoactive drug and to the extent that its effects interfere with someone's health or social interactions. So are we using drugs, and these drugs are affecting the way that we work, the way that we interact in the world, society, our family, our friends, those kinds of things. It says substance abuse involves physiological, psychological dependence, I have all this in a handout, by the way, if people want to pick one up, it's at the table over there. So that's what substance abuse is. That's stage 4. And then the final stage, stage 5, that's the addiction, that's the dependence. This is when people have gone through all those previous stages. Now you've crossed over into addiction or dependence. Sort of a lot of involved in that, but really, again, addiction defined as chronic relapsing brain disease. There's tolerance involved with addiction. You need more and more, larger and larger amounts to achieve the same desired effect. There's physical dependence. The absence of the substance, the absence of the drug makes people physically sick, withdrawal symptoms. That would be like physical dependence. Then there's the psychological dependence. This is kind of drug cravings, drug urges, when people begin to obsess on the thought of obtaining and using whatever the drug or substance may be over and over and over again. So these are all sort of different parts or different steps that go along with addiction or dependence. So basically, it's like you become so dependent on this drug or this substance that no longer can you function normally without it. You have to use whatever the substance is in order to what they call get well, or like be normal, just so you can function. So that's one of the hallmarks of addiction or dependence, is that. If you do pick up one of these handouts, one of these things I have over there, a lot of other good information on there. Talks about early intervention and how important it is, early intervention. Going back to ASAP program, what I do, working with adolescents, bringing this type of awareness and information into the community, I think is extremely important. I think youth, adolescents tend to make poor decisions. I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons why they make poor decisions, but some of it could be very simply misinformation or possibly not knowing at all. Maybe parents aren't talking to them. Maybe people at school aren't talking to them. So there's all sorts of reasons as to why kids may get involved. Again, why it's extremely important for early intervention, I think. I'm basically going out into the community and acting in these groups as if I'm just here to educate, I'm just here to inform, and I'm just here to encourage you to live this sort of sober, healthy lifestyle. That's really what it is that I do. I want to be able to bring this awareness and this message to the youth of Montgomery County and adolescents here, that you don't have to go that route. We need to be informed, we need to be educated, so we know what's out there and what it does, and we can make better decisions. I'm not going to go into it, but again, I worked at Avery Road, I worked at a lot of different places within the county, and I've seen firsthand what the devastation of addiction is. So again, why early intervention is so important. Let's not wait until the person's in their 20s or 30s and then go, oh, so what's up with drugs and alcohol? Because kids are picking up on that stuff 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. I think that's basically it, other than I do also have a list of services within Montgomery County on the back of the handout that I've just been reading off of. There are some substance abuse services, treatment services within Montgomery County for adolescents, and there's obviously some treatment services here available for adults as well. I'm not going to go over every single one of them, but I do have a list on the back of my thing. If you would like to pick up the handout, it goes into all those services, goes into all the stages of addiction and everything I just spoke about.
Thank you. I just have one question.
Sure.
If there's a parent here or a student, somebody here, and they really want to talk to somebody about their loved one, what would you recommend?
If someone is here at
Well,
the
they
school,
to here or wherever they might be, somebody finds out, oh, they heard about you. Or
Yes.
they have a family, a loved one that's addicted, and they don't know where to turn. They're living in this hellish experience.
Yes.
They're watching things disappearing from their home, their bank accounts going down, and they want to talk to somebody. Who do they call?
There's self-help support systems available within the community. There's Avery Road Treatment Center, which has a family group there for people that have family members that are suffering with alcohol, drug addiction, and things like that. So that's one point of contact is Avery Road Treatment Center for the family group. Another one would be counselors, school counselors would maybe be someone you could contact. A therapist would maybe be someone you could contact. Also, again, on the back of my list, there's some services on here like access to behavioral health services within Montgomery County, which is a place you could contact. SASCA, another place within Montgomery County, would be somewhere that you could contact. These are all free services that are available if people are struggling with these sorts of issues. These are people you could reach out to in the community.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
It's good to know these resources are out there. Now I want to tell you something. As a prosecutor, I would go to court every day and I would see cases and I'd say, why? Why did this happen? And there's no easy answer to why a young person or any person consciously uses drugs. But we're learning more now. We're learning that the brain is greatly impacted. This is not just an easy impulse to overcome. Now, as a defense attorney, I have clients now with addictions, and we look to people for help. And that's the key. We need to come together, identify who needs help, and try to get them help. Otherwise, they're just going to be a statistic in jail, deceased, or highly addicted and sick. And we need to intervene. So our next speaker has a lot of information for us. She herself is a young person in recovery. She herself is an individual that can help people that we go to. I've had clients and I've called her and said, my client is severely addicted. We need help. So at this point, I'm going to ask one of our other guest speakers to come up. If you would come up, Jessica Jeffrey, we would appreciate that. Thank you. And I want to thank you for coming here. Would you please tell us who you are, and could you start with where you work and then back us up?
Sure.
Thank you.
So I work for an out-of-state treatment provider, actually, called New England Recovery and Wellness, and I am an outreach coordinator for them, and I'm also a certified recovery coach as well. I'm the Mid-Atlantic outreach, so I handle DC, Maryland, Virginia, surrounding areas. So I'm very familiar in terms of, and I'm in recovery myself, so I'm very familiar in terms of how the treatment industry works in regards to trying to facilitate getting people into treatment, working with insurance companies, all of that fun stuff. I get to deal with that for you. So I try to make it a little bit less stressful for families and the addict themselves. So just to tell you a little bit about my story, there's a lot that I've already heard people share in regards to their experiences. Tons of stuff that Chuck touched on. I mean, the purpose piece for me was vital. I never really felt like I had a purpose. I always felt kind of lost. And it wasn't until that I found my purpose later on, and that was in recovery, that I truly believe that's what has helped me stay clean. And, you know, and just like he said, talking about the existing piece, that was how I felt in active addiction. And honestly, I felt that way prior. You know, I always just felt like I was existing. I wasn't really living life. And that's what recovery has given me today, is the opportunity to actually live my life. And so I'll give you guys a little background on me and where I'm at today. And share an experience of what it's like being in active addiction too. So I was actually born and raised here in Montgomery County. I went to Montgomery County Public Schools. I was raised in Germantown, Maryland, so right down the road. And I actually came here to MC after high school. I would like to tell you I graduated, but I did not. Active addiction definitely played a part in that, as well as some health issues I had. And from a very early age, I always felt like I didn't quite fit in, always felt like a little bit of an outsider, and I definitely seeked the acceptance of others. I wanted to be part of the crowd. You know, I wanted to be like all the other, in my mind, what like the cool popular kids were, right? So I compromised a lot of myself in a lot of different ways to fit in with that crowd. I was just never really satisfied with me. I was a great kid. I got great grades. I had presidential awards for academics. I was extremely involved in sports and athletics. I graduated from Northwest High School in 2006. And, you know, remember back then, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my life. I had great grades, could have gone, you know, to a four-year college, but decided, I was like, I'm going to go to MC and give myself some time. You know, and I came here, and my first semester of college, I started abusing substances heavily. Now, prior to that, in high school, I guess there was a transition between middle school and high school. I was introduced to marijuana for the first time when I was 14 years old by a guy that I was dating that was much older than me. He was 3 years older than me. And at that age, that's a big difference. You're talking 13, 14 to 17-year-old, right? And I've had multiple traumatic events throughout my life, and I would love to tell you that was what made me use, but nothing made me use. I mean, those were excuses I used, right, to justify and rationalize my drug use, but that's not what made me use. And at the age of 14, that was a pivotal age in my life. I was raped by the gentleman I was dating at 14. I began self-harming, cutting myself, and I truly believe that was my first drug. You know, it took the physical and emotional pain I had at that time into a physical pain. And I think it was a way of having control, because I felt like I had no control in my life, none. And so I began, self-harming, and at 14 I took my first drink. Now, my grandmother helped raise my sister and I with my mom. My mom was a single parent, and that was due to my dad being an addict. And she left my father when I was 4 months old. And so my grandmother helped raise us. And growing up in a home with an alcoholic, not the best example. She was a sweetheart, but she was a tough lady. And, I always had memories of her whenever she would get stressed out. It was, I need a drink. So when I was going through it, right, and I'm having some emotional turmoil going on in my life, the first thought that comes to mind is, well, that works for Granny. Why wouldn't it work for me? So I took my first drink. And the first time I drank, I was looking for this, instant gratification. I wanted this instant relief. So I chugged a big cup of rum and didn't get that instant relief. So right then and there, first time I drink, right, what do? I pour another cup and I chug it. First time I drank, I was 14 and I blacked out. And I drink by myself. That should have been a red flag right then and there. But part of all of this, too, is that going through the rape, and he was abusing me physically as well in other ways, and verbally, mentally, emotionally, everything, But part of it, too, was the self-worth. I had none. I took the love that I thought I deserved. And, I had a mother who loved me unconditionally, amazing woman. My grandmother loved us and helped raise us, like I said, did the best she could. And I had a stepfather in my life who, was a great man, but I had that mentality, if you're not my father, you can't tell me what to do, right? And because I want to do things my way, and he was, military family, he was the one putting down the ground rules. My mom, I knew how to manipulate her, and I knew how to get what I wanted. And I took that and I ran with it, and that led to continuous problems down the road, and like I said, in high school, great kid, I played sports, and at 14, I was also diagnosed with an autoimmune condition called scleroderma. It deals with ligaments, joints, connective tissue, so I had chronic pain problems very early, and hence how I got started on prescribed narcotics. And I never really abused them too bad in high school, nothing crazy, and I was a binge drinker on the weekends. I was a weekend warrior, as I called it, and after football games, the party was at my house. I was after prom, after homecoming, right? But I always felt like I was the popular kid, right? Everyone wanted to be with me. Everyone wanted to hang out with me. No. I remember after prom, senior year, and standing in my basement, game of beer pong going on, right? And I look around the room, and it was like the who's who I thought of school, right? And it was the first time that it hit me. I was like, wow, they're not here for friendship. They're not here because they like me, right? They're here for a free place to drink and for free booze, right? And that was where I truly, genuinely felt for the first time, loneliness isn't about how many people are around you. It comes from within. And that was an all too familiar feeling for me. Through everything I've been through, the health issues, the rape and the domestic violence and the drug use was something that, I kept very private. I never spoke about it. And that's something that, being able to work with Speak Up, Save a Life has given me the opportunity to go into schools, to speak to kids, share my story, and let them know, the cutting, the, abuse and everything I've experienced, share that with them, because it's amazing how many kids have opened up afterwards or pulled me aside and thanked me and opened up about their experience. And that's where there's no greater therapeutic value than one person helping another who has a shared experience. It's amazing because nobody really gets it and can make a difference like someone else who's been there. And especially when you've gone through it and you're on the other side of it, being able to guide someone through that process. And that's what I have the gift today to do, is give back and, help walk people through that process. And it's a beautiful thing, But I was extremely lost for a very long time. And my story is much like, what Chuck said, where I started with prescribed narcotics and I was justifying and rationalizing that it was prescribed to me and it was okay. And then, once again, here we go, it was cheaper for me to do heroin. And everyone I knew who was doing pills started doing heroin. It was cheaper. It was honestly more readily available than pills were. And I began injecting. It was something I was disgusted by, I was ashamed of, because I would like to think, like, I don't look like a heroin addict, right? Like, I don't, but what exactly does that look like, right? It looks like this. It looks like your soccer mom. It looks like an officer, a judge, nurses. It doesn't discriminate, and that's something that people need to understand. You can't look at somebody and just, you automatically assume it's the homeless guy on the side of the highway. No, well, that was me at one point. I was panhandling at one point to support my addiction. Because I had no money. I couldn't hold down a job. And I went to any length to get what I needed because I had gotten to that point of dependence. I physically had to have it, or I was violently ill. I couldn't function. And when I was 19 years old, I was blessed with a little girl. And she is the highlight of my life. I absolutely adore her. And she's a beautiful person inside and out. But I put that little girl through misery. She walked through my addiction with me. And for a good 6.5 years of her life, I got clean at, she was 7 years old, and I got clean in December 2014. And I've been clean since then. And, to hear her, we had the privilege of being filmed for a documentary to share a parent-child perspective. And I had no idea what was going to come out of her mouth. No idea. And at first she didn't want to do it. Because she was like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't like talking about that time. So then I get, I'm on edge. What does she remember? What does she know? And what did she see? Because I always thought she's too young. She won't remember anything. She has no idea. That wasn't the case. For her, what she remembered was the feelings. To hear that little girl talk about, she remembered, me being laid out on a couch, sleeping upstairs in my room, and her putting a blanket over me and tucking me in, and she said she just wanted to make sure I was comfortable, and then to hear the words come out of her mouth that she blamed herself. She thought that she did something. Maybe I was too harsh on her. That killed me. Still kills me. And I had to pull her aside later after the interview and be like, look, baby, this had nothing to do with you. Mommy made her own choices. And I felt like complete crap. I'll tell you, to be honest, like during that interview, it brought up a lot of old feelings and a lot of old emotions. But the beautiful thing today is that I don't have to feel like that way ever again, and neither does my daughter. And it was a reminder to me to keep doing what I'm doing, to keep, to stay clean, stay on the path that I'm on. And I have those open conversations with her. She's 10 and a half now, but I don't think you're ever too young to talk to your kids about substances, ever. We have open communication. She'll tell me about a kid, like picking on someone in school, and I have talks with her about we don't do that, and imagine how somebody else feels. Put yourself in their position, right? And I never in a million years thought I would end up with a needle in my arm doing heroin. I never saw that for myself. And nobody ever really does. None of us grow up and, as a kid, like my plan is to become a heroin addict. But I didn't know how to deal with life, and I didn't know how to deal with the pain that came with life. And through the process of recovery, I was able to find other ways to deal, other ways to cope, instead of having to turn to a substance. Because the majority of times, the people who are addicted, we self-medicate with the drugs and the alcohol. There's deeper issues at hand that need to be addressed. And majority of times, it's some form of underlying mental health. And this is something that everyone in our community has been touched in some form or fashion in one way or another. And that's where these events like this are absolutely amazing because it brings the community together. No one is immune to it. My mother never thought in a million years it would be her child, right? It's always not my child. That'll never happen to me. Well, it did, and it could be your kid, or it could be your grandchild, or your best friend, but it's about knowing how to openly talk to these people, and instead of shunning them, put a hand out, grab that hand. And I can tell you that it does get better. If recovery does work. And for, anyone who knows anyone in recovery, it just takes work. It's not easy. Some days are harder than others. But I know for me specifically that where I've come and how far I've come from where I was, nothing today is worth going back out. Because the way things are today, I go back out, I will die. And there's no way around that. So I take it to heart, and I live every day to the fullest, and I do my best to be there for those who are struggling, whether it be the addict themselves or their family, a loved one, it doesn't matter, So like they were talking about resources, I'm always here, and I'm more than happy to give out my number to anybody to call, if anyone's struggling. I am always here regardless, I'll get them plugged into recovery communities, whether it be AA, NA, fellowships, support groups for families, that's my job, but it's also my purpose, so if anyone's struggling, please let me help, and help me to fulfill my purpose, so thank you.
The word strength and courage, the words come to mind, strength and courage, as you hear some of our speakers. I think something that Jessica said that really hits home is having courageous conversations at our homes. How difficult it is to talk with a young person or your mother or father. I've had young people approach me and say, I have a problem because I get in the car every time with a drunk driver. It's my dad. How do we start these conversations? It takes courage to communicate with your family members and loved ones. Our next guest presenter is a pillar of our community. His son was a quarterback at a local high school, Magruder High School, and was a wonderful young man, but at an early age started experimenting with drugs. So at this time, I'm going to ask Don Wood to come up and tell his story and the impact that his son's life and overdose has had in our community and on his family. Thank you, Don.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you. Thank you. Hi. Yeah, you just heard a miracle speak, and that's what Jessica is. It's a miracle that she is where she is, because that doesn't often happen. It goes the other way all too often. On March 2nd of 2015, I went to pick up my son. He was living in a sober house, supposed to be drug and alcohol free, but if you want to get drugs, you can get drugs in there, and I found him dead. It's devastating. He'd been dead about 14 hours. It's an awful sight for a father to find his firstborn son in that condition. So after that, to deal with our grief, my wife and I tried to figure out what else to do, and this is one of the things I do. I speak to parents. I've learned so much. We also went to Avery Road. Avery Road Treatment Center, which you heard, is, my son had been there 3 different times, a 28-day detox. And they have a support group for people who have loved ones that are in addiction there. And it's to help them understand what addiction is, the process, what's happening to their loved ones. Because when they first come in there, they have no idea, like we were clueless. We were clueless for a long time. But that helped us to understand what the hell happened throughout our lives. My son started in middle school, we now know. We pieced together so much of his life. Started in middle school, in high school, college. He was 32 years old when he died. We thought for the longest time it was abuse, that he abused drugs and made very bad decisions, was immature. We understand now that it was addiction driving that all that time. We belong to a group called SOUL, Surviving Our Ultimate Loss. My wife does. She's one of the people that started it, made up now of 30 different families in Montgomery County who have lost a son or daughter in the past 3 years. And the stories are all too similar. Can I see a hands of people who have children in maybe middle school, high school, college? Anyone? All those are all risk areas. I mean, it's not because, I know I talk to parents and it's like, thank God they're out of high school. And I said, I can't tell you how many parents that we know now who have lost a son or daughter thinking they made it through high school only to have them get addicted to heroin and eventually die and overdose. It's a devastating disease, addiction. Excuse me. The situation today, you hear the numbers, they're staggering. 63,000 people a year die of drug overdoses. A significant portion of those, if not half or slightly more, is opioids, the opioid epidemic. And those numbers are underreported because we know of the 30 people that have died that we know, 10 of us, the death was undetermined. The manner of death and cause of death, and I always get those two mixed up, but it was intoxication from heroin, fentanyl, and then it was undetermined. And it's about 25%. Those numbers are only going to get worse as time goes on, because now they're cutting the heroin with fentanyl, they're cutting cocaine with fentanyl, they have Xanax pills that are counterfeit, they're also made with fentanyl. That is, and the numbers aren't decreasing. And the other side of this is, so how do you turn this around? We've got to help those that are currently addicted, those that need rehab services. And rehab is not an event. Rehab and trying to get your life clean is a process that they'll be working the rest of their lives. We need to increase the service. I think only 10% of the people that really try to get help are able to get help. And then the miracle, which is Jessica, are those that want to actually decide to get help. And if you understand, so the thing to understand about addiction is is it a choice? A lot of people still think that. They don't understand this whole thing about being a disease, that the brain is damaged, that it has been rewired, that long-term memories are coded into the brain, and it's going to be that way the rest of their lives. They can learn to live their lives, they can learn with the plasticity of the brain, they can help it repair itself to a large degree, but they will always be an addict. They will always have to, and there's certain triggers that may cause them to relapse at any time. And when they do relapse, even if it's 10 years later, they will be back just like they had never quit. That's how devastating it is. My son's story, he was an athlete in high school. I mean, he played quarterback and recruiter, he ran track, he got good grades, he was accepted to colleges, but he always was drinking, and we thought so much of it was teenage behavior. My message is to parents. The parents today don't understand the environment, and it's worse today than it was when he went to school. Today's environment, these kids in high school can get their hands on whatever drugs they want to get their hands on. And we talk to them, and they'll share with us when they're in social settings, and there's alcohol and marijuana, there will be other pills. There will be a variety of different things they can take. And here's the risk. The risk is they don't know how their brain is wired. You don't know how their brain is wired as a parent. They'll try these, and some people will try these drugs and not like them. Some people won't try them. Some will try them and not like them. Some will try them and they'll get a good feeling and they'll go into abuse and they'll abuse them over time. They'll abuse them. And then for some people, say maybe 3 out of 10, something will click in their brain. And there's outwardly, there may not look like there's anything wrong, that they have no self-esteem problems, they're doing well in school, they have a lot of friends, they have social networks, and yet something clicks in their brain and they'll tell you, it's like something was missing. It filled a void. I realized that I needed it to survive. I had to have that to continue to function. My son was addicted. He went here. He got an associate's degree here at one point, worked, he was a functional addict, so he worked after that, decided to go back to college and finish his degree, went to Salisbury. We didn't know this, so we're all happy he turned a corner. And for 2 years, he was addicted to Oxy. He had been busted up for Oxy. He violated probation. He couldn't stay clean. He was dealing with that. At the same time, going to school, he graduated. He had a part-time job. And I said, how in the world could you do all that, addicted to Oxy? He said, that's why I could do that. I mean, that in his mind. And he said, and when I finally, it's hard to talk, you can't rationally have a discussion because the part of the brain that you're trying to reach when you understand addiction, it's shut down. The frontal cortex that helps you evaluate consequences of actions and helps you understand and helps you try to make good decisions, when you're addicted, it's actually shut down. The addiction happens in the deepest part of the primitive part of the brain. And the addict, when you cross over, and you heard that before from Andy, when you cross over into addiction, it goes from the drug is the drug, and I'm using the drug to get high, to I'm abusing drugs. When it crosses over to addiction, the drug is now survival. And the brain, because it is in survival mode, it's telling you, you need this to survive. That's why they can't quit. Because I've heard one person call it a disease of choice, because your choice is gone. It has now overtaken that frontal cortex. Oh my God.
we want you to stay. At this time, we're going to ask our panel presenters to please come up and join us and have a seat with us.
Okay.
There's several of you, but we're going to continue. Please, we got questions for you. I want you to stay, please. But if you're on the panel, please come up. Lieutenant Kakinos, please join us. I think retired Colonel Lieutenant Captain Carafano may be gone, unless he's still here. Don, would you stay? I want to ask you a question or two. And you all could come up and join us. While everyone's settling in here, and we're going to get to the panel part of this presentation. So your son went to 28-day inpatient.
Right.
And I'm assuming, am I wrong, that if you go to 28-day inpatient, you're fine, everything's solved?
Yeah, that's, he went there 3 different times, and there are people that can tell you they do that 5 times, 6 times. The 28 days is actually detox. It actually cleans, it gives you a baseline. Your system will be cleaned of the drugs, and you have to monitor this because when you're coming down off of alcohol, is one of the most dangerous things to come off of, and benzodiazepines also, because you can have seizures. You can, but 28 days just get your body clean. You get a baseline, and from that point on, you really need to get into the kind of rehab so you can learn to live your life. And it's very difficult that first year because you now have to learn how to function, and you have to have other ways to handle stress and situations. You have to actually learn to live without that drug helping you live.
So we're seeing a lot of changes in laws, and we're seeing a lot of people and families that are being impacted. I understand that even a local judge here, his daughter died from an overdose.
Yeah, she's part of our organization.
Soul is survivors of the ultimate loss. So before we move on, and we're going to have you participate in our Q&A in a few minutes, what advice would you give to a parent or a person who has a brother or sister, and you know they're suffering and they're in denial? I know it's a tough question. I mean, there's no easy answer.
There is no easy answer. And that's what we enabled our son. Now that we understand addiction, and that's why we go to Avery Road. And we hear the stories and every week. And we've gone there for 3 years now. My wife and I actually facilitate 1 week a month and to help the parents that are there. But there is no easy answer. And we find out that you really have to. When being a parent, I heard someone say that when you find out your child is addicted, you have all these parental reactions. Do the opposite. Of what you think you should do as a parent, because what you're actually doing and trying to help them is often not helping. You're really hurting at times. But the parents need to get outside help. You can't, my wife and I thought we could do this ourselves. You cannot do this yourself. You need to get outside help. You need to get outside help, whether it's therapists, counseling, support groups, so that you can share and find out that there are other people that are going through the same things. And when you talk to them, you find out things that have worked and not worked for them.
I want to thank you. I'd like you to stay because I think there's going to be questions for you, but I want to thank you for the courage. Is there anything else you'd like to say about Donnie or about anything, your experiences? I know, John, you have so much knowledge, and you've helped so many people, and it's so hard, I think. Even though you do it well, I think it's hard to stand up in front of people. We've been to 50, 60 audiences together, and I think it takes a lot of courage. And I know you always leave the stage thinking, did I say enough? Did I touch enough people?
Yeah, there's so much to say. There's so many things. I have a whole list of things I go down. But let me tell you, there's 2 things that will help your education. There's YouTube. You go on YouTube. Pleasure Unwoven will help you understand the whole addiction. What happens in addiction? It's by Dr. Kevin McCauley. And then there's a book, Dreamland. And Dreamland is by Sam Quinones. And it's the story of the whole opiate epidemic. And we went down and met him just a couple weeks ago. We had opportunity at a book signing and talked to him. And he did so much research on this, but it will help everybody. It'll help you understand how we got to be where we are. Because these drugs, opiates have been around for a long time. Vicodins, Percocets, Dilaudid, they've been there. Hydrocodone, oxycodone, that's all. They've all been around. Why now? But he takes you through every aspect of it's like the perfect storm. You couldn't have written this any worse or better. For everything to come together for where we are today.
Thank you, Don. We're going to ask you questions again in a few minutes. Thank you. Thank you. So in a few minutes, we're going to have a lieutenant, a police officer lieutenant who's in uniform, discuss some of the Special Investigation Division and some of the things police officers in the county are doing behind the scenes to help people that are addicted and overdosing. But first, we have an incredible speaker here. We're so fortunate to have Susan Rich, who's going to come forward. Actually, are you more comfortable seated?
I can stand either way. I mean, sit or stand. It's
Why don't you seat, and then we'll continue here with this type of presentation. So thank you for being here. Would you tell us who you are and what do you do for a living and what information do you have? And thank you.
Like Jessica, I lost a parent at an early age. Actually, 3 months old, my mother died. And I'm from North Carolina originally, but unlike Jessica, at the age of 25, after graduating college with a degree in microbiology from NC State, and working for 4.5 years in pharmaceutical research, I found my calling. And that is to prevent prenatal alcohol and drug exposure. And I've been doing that for the past 26 years. It led me to do a Master of Public Health and Health Policy at the University of North Carolina. And I worked 2 years in a rural area of North Carolina developing programs for women in recovery and their dependent children, including a 24-unit transitional housing facility where the women could be reunited with their children from foster care and live independently, but with community building where they receive comprehensive services. This is a program that when I came up after graduating medical school from the University of North Carolina and came up to Georgetown to see all the beautiful farmland here in Maryland, I said, well, I want to develop a program like Grace Court from North Carolina here in Maryland, but I had to pay off my student loans, and I had to finish residency in psychiatry and a child psychiatry fellowship. So about 9 years later, I paid off all my student loans and practicing child psychiatry in Potomac, and I bought a farm 2 years ago, Dreamcatcher Meadows, where I am developing a therapeutic farm animal sanctuary for children with neurodevelopmental disorders caused by parental alcohol and substance use. Most of my patients over the last, say, 10 years, 11 years, have been those adopted from Russia and the Ukraine and Eastern Europe, but we have plenty homegrown ones from here in the United States. I do believe we need to stop taking the children away from their biological mothers, and we need to start letting the mothers learn how to parent them and let those children help heal the mothers. Because what we're doing is we're creating ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences, by not helping the mothers. We're ripping the babies away from the mothers and then putting them into foster care, oftentimes traumatizing the child, traumatizing the families, and it's a vicious cycle. So that said, that gives you a nutshell of who I am. I've written a book on the topic, which is The Silent Epidemic, A Child Psychiatrist's Journey Beyond Death Row. I've been to death row in about 5 states. At one point I had my medical license in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Tennessee, Washington, D.C., although they don't have death row, and Maryland. But it was too hard to keep up with all that. So now I only take on federal cases where I don't have to have my license in that state. But I see these kids all over the state of Maryland in detention centers and training schools, and we need to really stop it. So the sister silent epidemic of the opioid epidemic is happening to our children and to the babies. And what happens then is they grow up with addictions, and they grow up with severe problems overcoming learning disabilities. They have attention problems. They have homelessness. The young women are sex trafficked. They are kept in bondage, really all over the planet. I have been asked to go to Lithuania, where they're implementing my same idea of farm animal therapy, and actually, instead of taking the babies away from the moms and putting them in orphanages, as they have done in the past, they're now putting the whole family, the mothers, the fathers, and the children, on farms so that the children can be parented by their own parents, and the parents can get help in sobriety. But that said, you know, we're not going to solve this problem by us doing it the way we've always done it. We have to take a step back and see how we can do it differently. I do believe that one of the things to keep in mind is that meaning and purpose in life is the one way to overcome every problem that we call mental illness or addictions, is giving children meaning and purpose. And one of the bigger problems that I've seen here in the county, unlike, let's say, North Carolina, where the pressures aren't quite so high for expectations, is that what you're seeing is children who walk into kindergarten and they see plastered all over the walls 10 keys to college readiness. All right, in kindergarten, first of all, in my hometown, we didn't have kindergarten. I learned to read and write by my grandmother, who had a 6th grade education, who raised me, right? And let me tell you, I'm no worse for not going to kindergarten. That said, I do believe in Head Start. I do believe in preschool and kindergarten, but we do not need to force college down children's throat in kindergarten. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the expectations of the parents often really are hidden, but they're still there, and the child feels that they have to be playing soccer and they have to be doing violin lessons and piano lessons, and they have to be doing all these things. And by the time they're in high school, they've got to be on the track team, and they've got to be on the, gifted and talented everything. And really, it's phenomenal that in Montgomery County, the children on grade level are considered honors classes. There's usually only one class of what's really on grade level. And it's those stressors that we put on kids. And believe me, I have 28 years of education, and I did very well academically. But academics are not for everybody. And I think that there's a lot to be said for the guy on TV. I don't know, he's something like Len the plumber. But he's the guy that wears the baggy pants, and I don't know, what is that guy on TV that does he's like a hillbilly. But anyway, he says, it's okay for you to have a vocational training. It's okay for you to learn a skill. And that's what Dreamcatcher Meadows is all about. It's about teaching kids life skills, adaptive functions, giving them meaning and purpose. I was asked to be here because of my insight, but I also have opportunities at Dreamcatcher Meadows for young people from Montgomery College to come and work with me. I've taken young women to the International Congress on the Law and Mental Health in Vienna, Austria, and young women who helped me with my blog also spoke with me in Toronto at the American Psychiatric Association annual meeting. I do this. I take them, even though I'm not, I don't work for academic medicine, I do international talks all the time, and I take young people. You know, these 2 women who went with me were rising seniors in college. They weren't, these were not superstar, graduate students or anything, but then they got into graduate school because of those efforts. And I think it's mentoring and role modeling, and even if you're a parent or a grandparent, you can do this. You can teach the young people. And it's just like other speakers have said, you have to start at young ages. I've started at a very young age with both my kids, and they know how to identify people out in public who are drinking. And it's just like kids used to say, ooh, they're smoking, ooh. My kids are like, oh, look at that. And then they see them get in the car and drive away. They see the people on America's Funniest Videos at weddings, making fools of themselves and hurting themselves, falling off tables and things. So I think it's those approaches that will help. So I'm here in the community. I'm just down the road, not even 7 minutes really. So I have cards. If any of you want to reach out, I'm here.
Thank you, Dr. Rich. And we may have questions for you. Thank you, Doctor. And it's great to have a common sense approach, and you're hearing all these different perspectives, but I have a few questions, and they're rhetorical. Let's say you were at a party with a friend, and your friend was sick or overdosing from drugs or alcohol. Would you know what to do? Let's say a car comes up, and you think they have drugs or alcohol in the car, or somebody's under the influence. Would you know what to do? Would you know that if somebody was sick, to put them in the recovery position so they don't literally swallow and choke on their vomit and die? Would you know to call 911? Well, now you would. But you hear common sense principles. For example, we all know that if a woman who's pregnant is taking drugs or using drugs or alcohol, it's going to have effect on the unborn child. We all know that. But we're seeing the results of that. So together as a community, we need to come together. We're hearing all these different stances. But what would you do? How are we going to fight this? So we're going to get a report now from Lieutenant Kokinos about boots on the ground. What's happening? What is the police doing? And the police department's very sophisticated in Montgomery County because they've already made decisions. We don't want to arrest people. We want to help people. So Lieutenant Kokinos, thank you for being here. And this is Jason Kokinos. Can you tell us, what is the police department doing? And can you share with us some statistics about what's going on here in our county? Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Steve. So traditionally, when we think of police, we think of enforcement, right? We think of people being put in handcuffs and taken to jail and things of that nature. That's the old way of thinking, if you will. So in Montgomery County, we have a multi-tier approach when it comes to the drug problem, really the epidemic, if you will. So is enforcement something that the police do when it comes to opioids and things of that nature? Yes, we have to have an enforcement piece. But what we can do is we can channel where we direct that enforcement. And what I mean by that is there's other pieces, and this will all tie in, to what we're doing. Obviously, traditionally, we just did enforcement. We'd arrest people, take them to jail, arrest people, take them to jail. We can't arrest our way out of a drug problem, and we understand that here in Montgomery County. So what are we doing is we're taking our people that go out and arrest people, those resources, we want to focus them towards the drug dealers, the people that are in it for greed, that don't care if people die. All they care about is the dollar, right? And they're pushing drugs on our street, ruining families, ruining kids, and we want to target our efforts on that. So we go after the drug dealers with enforcement through investigations and things like that, through community assistance. We have anonymous tip lines that people can call in and report drug activity and drug dealers. But what do we do with the people that we encounter that are drug users? Do we need to put them in jail? Do we need to spend our resources arresting them? Not necessarily. So what we do is, when it comes to drug users, the police department has evolved, and now we have officers within the police department that deal with diverting people into substance abuse treatment, giving people information, trying to help people. So if we arrest drug dealers, but then we can hopefully take drugs off the street that way, if we could take people that have some problems, some addictions, and get them off the substances, well, now we're taking the customers away from the drug dealers. So we're kind of doing two different fronts. And there's a third front where we do the education and prevention, like kind of what I'm doing here today, talking to you folks and speaking about what we're doing at the police department. But we have now, luckily, the county council and Mr. Leggett, our executive, have been fantastic with Health and Human Services and stuff to get some funding. We actually have in the police department a civilian that is an addiction therapist. And when there's overdoses, when someone overdoses on opioids, she comes out and says, hey, do you want help? Tomorrow I can get you into a treatment facility. So that's what the police department's doing, trying to solve the problem not by arrest, but by getting people some help. So we do have a problem here. That's the other thing. Sometimes people don't think that, oh, it's not Montgomery County. We don't have any issues here. But the last 2 years, 2016, 2017, we've had about 200 opioid-related overdoses each year. 400 just in the last 2 years. Now, of that, about 110 people have died. Now, to put that in perspective, I'm sure everybody here is very offended by homicide. If you see in the news that someone got shot in the street or someone shot at someone in a neighborhood, you'd be bothered if that happened in your neighborhood. Well, we average about 19 of those a year in Montgomery County. So you talk about the opioid deaths, over 50 or 60 a year. That's more than double of our homicide rate. So people should be very upset about that, very offended. But so what are we doing to try to help people? Police, we have a great fire rescue service here, and that's why we don't have more people that have passed away from these overdoses. But what we've been doing is we've been equipping officers with Narcan because we want to try to help save lives. So not only does the fire department have it, but police officers have it. When there's an overdose that goes out, Normally, back in the day, we wouldn't respond lights and sirens to something like that, but now we've incorporated where we will respond in an emergency status with lights and sirens, try to get there fast to save people. So once someone overdoses, what do we do there? Hopefully they survive, we can save them, or fire department can save them, or the hospital. Well, then we have, like I said, our addiction therapists come out, try to get treatment. Detectives come out from our drug enforcement section and say, hey, who did you get this stuff from? We want to go after that person. Will you help us? Will you help us to prevent yourself from maybe dying one day because they're addicted? And if we can maybe get rid of the drug dealer, it might make it a little more difficult for someone to get some product. On top of the treatment aspect, you got to try to get them off of doing the drugs. So we also have a pharmaceutical investigation unit because that's a big problem with pills and doctor shopping and people getting fake prescriptions and stuff. So we have investigators that do that. The state of Maryland's implementing a prescription monitoring program. So I have a family member that was addicted to OxyContin back in the day. And what she would do was she would get prescriptions from different doctors and go to different pharmacies, and next thing you know, she's got hundreds of pills. Well, there's a database that they're implementing that will prevent that, so the pharmacies can see where you're getting prescriptions and how much you're getting. So that's something that's fantastic. So really, from the police department angle, Chief Manger's our chief of police, and he takes a very broad approach to this, not just enforcement, but all the other things I talk about. So we look forward to keep doing those things, and we want to work with the community to try to solve this problem, and that's us.
Thank you, thank you. We have to give a round of applause to the police department. Because generally, some of us are just hearing negative stories about the police, but they're doing so much more not to arrest people now and thinking about resources outside the box. And it takes a lot of courage for Chief Tom Manger to take this position, a progressive position of let's help people, let's not arrest people. And this is a great county, but we're only as good as our citizens. We're only as good as you because we need you to identify who are these drug dealers and make a secret private phone call. We've gone to meetings, and I love it. People approach us afterwards and give us information. We never talk with them again. Never again. But you need to identify who needs help. We didn't come here to talk about the laws. We came here really from a health perspective. But you all already know that possession of marijuana is still a crime. You can still go to jail. Possession of cocaine up to 4 years, heroin up to 4 years. You know that distribution of these crimes can result in penalties up to 20 years of incarceration. I know you know these things, so I won't tell you that. I won't tell you that if you drive under the influence of alcohol or drugs, you can go to jail for 1 year or up to 2 if it's an enhanced penalty. I won't tell you that we have drug recognition experts that can go out and look and see what kind of drug you're using beyond alcohol. I'm not going to tell you of these impacts because it's not why we're here. I'm not going to tell you that using drugs and heroin and these opioids can cause heart ailments, collapsed veins, bad decisions that can lead to sexually transmitted diseases, kidney disease, bone pain, painful withdrawal, hospitalization, effect on impact, arrest, death. You all know these things already. So now's the time for us to come together. In about 20 minutes, this program is going to be over. It's not the end of the program, it's the beginning of a relationship that was born here at Montgomery College between you, our community, and between the resources that are here for you. No one is here because they want to make money. We're all here because we want to help. So we've got a little bit of time for Q&A, and I have a lot of questions for these panel members, but we have a microphone here for the audience, and we also have some prizes. I don't want people to start looking under their chairs yet, but we do have some prizes. So does anybody have any questions, or would you like me to start with the questions? But we love audience questions. Yes, the young lady in the back. We're going to give you a microphone. This is your moment in the sun.
Thank you. To the young lady who told her story,
Jessica,
I commend you because when you're able to do that and you're probably able to make a big, big difference, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And when you're transparent like that, that helps them break that down. So my kudos to you. And I would also say, because I work with domestic violence victims, probably a lot of things may have stemmed from that you're not even aware of. But my question overall, I guess it would be to the police officer, for the people who, I guess, how about this? I'm just going to tell it like it is. You have some doctors out there, and there are some different stories going on. They call them pill mills, that they are basically glorified drug dealers. They prescribe these pills for people who need and want different things. A lot of people who are maybe involved in modeling or acting or even Hooters. I thought I was getting my mic taken away from me. I thought I was saying something I shouldn't say.
I only do that to Don.
Okay. Who have a need in order to stay small or stay slim and control their appetite, all that good stuff. Doctors, they will go to doctors and just like she said, get different prescriptions, and before you know it, after they've done a lot of doctor shopping, they have a whole host of pills. What are you doing to bring those people down? These are people who make a good living, but they found a way to make ultimate money, I guess you could say. Another way of making money, but it's at the expense of all these people, ultimately leading to this poor man and the death of his son.
This is a great question, and it's a more holistic question is, what about these manufacturers that are making synthetic drugs and selling things to our young people? And in tune with that question, what about the pharmacies and the doctors? I don't mean to look at you for all the answers, but you know a lot of the laws, and I'm an attorney, so I have some experience as well. So please, Lieutenant Kokinos.
So we're hoping that, well, going forward, and I'll talk about what we're doing, but going forward, this prescription drug monitoring program, once it's fully implemented here, I think it fully implemented in 2019, but everybody who prescribes controlled dangerous substances and people who fill controlled substances have to be a part of that program. So hopefully that'll slow that down. But yeah, there is a problem with doctors that sell prescriptions for cash or sell they're drug dealers is what they are, and we want them. So, you know, we've had cases like that in Montgomery County. We have detectives that do pharmaceutical investigations, and part of that is doctors that sell. Also, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the federal drug agency, they have a task force here in Washington, D.C. that's just for pharmaceuticals. And they build cases for federal prosecution against doctors. And DEA is important because DEA is who provides the license for these doctors to write these prescriptions. So they're the enforcement arm for that. So we partner with them, and we do go after them. The thing is, sometimes they're tough to catch, so we always look for community's assistance. If someone knows a dirty doctor, definitely let us know. We can send undercover officers in to buy from them. We can build a case and bring them down, but we can't do it alone, that's for sure.
It's a great answer, and also, ma'am, it's a great question. They can go to jail, and let me say this, there are new laws now that we're trying to get passed in the legislature, that law enforcement's trying to get passed, for enhanced penalties for people that sell this drug and it results in a death. So for example, all these overdose scenes, they're trying not just to help the person, but track where did it come from, who sold it, let's stop this. And we want to make examples. Law enforcement wants to make examples of doctors and drug dealers, and they want to help people that are addicted. So the answer to your question is we need more sophistication, but there are efforts being made. Tough question to answer.
And Steve, a lot of people, we're talking about opioids, but a lot of these doctor shoppers, or the pill things that you're talking about, the doctors, with students especially, is the Adderall, you know, and the Xanax too. And those are serious, and you can't do that either. Just, you know, I know we're talking about heroin and Oxycontin and oxycodone and stuff, but Adderall and Xanax and stuff, that's, you know, bad stuff too, and they can't do that either.
And this is why we need to monitor everything that we're taking with prescription drugs. Yes, sir, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in. It's a pleasure to hear all of you experts. Some of us are faculty and advisors here to various clubs. So there are two parts of a question. How do we identify those that are going through these addictions? Whether they are our students or our colleagues, but mostly our students. And the second one for Mr. Don Woods, you mentioned that there are certain triggers that can start the people or can restart the addiction. So what are some of those triggers and how can they be identified? Thank you.
Dr. Rich, I'm going to ask you the first part of the question. So, you know, obviously we can know by looking at somebody changing appetites, behaviors, appearance, hands with certain marks on them, and there's a microphone there. But I'm hopeful you can answer, what would be some of the signs that somebody would say, you know what, I need to try to help this person?
Well, I think when they're doing things, you know, that are, you know, seeming suspicious, like, you know, kind of hiding their behaviors, or there's been a change in their behavior. For instance, let's say they used to be an outgoing, you know, social person, and now they're, you know, withdrawing more, or vice versa. You know, they're going around doing a lot of different things. If it's a colleague, their mannerisms sometimes can point it out. I think part of your question was, what do you do if you notice that? And, there's this adage, see something, say something, that has started to come about. And we're taught in medical school that if you drive down the road in a bike and the guy in front of you on a bike has a dark mole on his back, that you're suspecting might be a melanoma, because we're trained to recognize melanoma, that ethically we have to say something. It's the same as seeing a mother, doing something to her child that might be harmful. You might want to tell her that. Same as this. If you see a colleague that has, some behaviors, you either go to them and, ask if they need help, or you go to their supervisor. Because if we don't start, saying something when we see something, this isn't going to change. If you see a neighbor's kid that is doing something suspicious, go to the parent. This is what I believe. And it's not going to be the same symptoms in every person. People can hide, their addictions, just like, Jessica said that she hid, by, having good grades, and she was popular, and she had all these things going for her, presidential awards and things like that. So parents don't, they're not always knowledgeable, but the friends, the peers, I think that's why we need to empower them. When they see something, they need to say something, and who to say it to.
Yeah. And Don, please add.
Thank you. Yeah, as far as parents, so the people we know, by the time you see some of the signs of drug use and abuse, it's already far down the path. And we'll all go back. Many of the families that we know whose son or daughter was addicted to heroin, and I always picture people rolling their eyes when I say this, although they wouldn't do that, but didn't even know their son or daughter was using drugs, let alone to find out, I'm not only using drugs, I'm addicted to heroin, and the shock of that. And when they go back and find out, and they start thinking of things, there were signs, but so much when they're young, so much of the behavior, you have teenage behavior. We all know what teenage behavior is like. Well, I was difficult. We all know. So much of what goes on with these young people is there's a range of teenage behavior. And some of that is driven by drugs, but it's so hard to tell. Now, they'll be nodding off at dinner, and they'll have always a plausible reason. Well, because I've been studying, I have a cold, I took some NyQuil. They always have these reasons. And when I tell parents, you have to follow your gut, because early intervention is absolutely critical. The sooner you can get on top of this, the better you're going to be. And certainly, once they hit 18 and they're out of the house, they're adults, and it's even more difficult, almost impossible, for you to try to do anything with them at that time.
I want to clarify something. If there's an emergency, Montgomery County has set up that there's a crisis intervention unit, there's an emergency evaluation petition. So there are different levels, I think, Professor, there are different levels of what you might want to do with somebody that's in trouble. It might be talking with their parent or with them on an initial level. But if you're a teacher or a professor and you're noticing in a class, then you might want to make an effort to communicate with them or speak with somebody here that's in guidance counseling. But ultimately, if it's an emergency, we need to act. We need to have courage. We need to not worry about what people think about us. If somebody's dying or sick and we potentially can get them to the right place or get them help, or if we don't want to get involved, we can call. We can get the crisis intervention team. We can get somebody out to the house in minutes if they're threatening to hurt themselves or other people, because we don't want it to become a police matter. We don't want it to graduate up to all of a sudden it's a serious assault and they're incarcerated and we're dealing with with criminal issues, mental health issues, and the whole myriad of issues. So we need to address these things early, because by the time you're seeing it, it's getting to the point where it's becoming an emergency. So we need to act on it. You need to follow your instincts.
Steve,
you're never going to get in trouble for caring. Yes.
Yeah, two things. And what I tell parents is you've got to get outside help. So on early intervention, catching this as soon as possible, you suspect something, then like Suburban Hospital, Montgomery, MedStar, and Olney, they have behavioral health areas where you can get assessments done. They can work with you to go through, and they can have counseling as well. And you can get an assessment done. You can see what kind of treatment may be needed. what kind of help may be needed.
So I have a question for Jessica, and I think it's from a lot of us in the audience. Jessica, we have somebody, we love them, they don't listen, they won't do anything, they're literally on the run, they're addicted, they maybe even have overdosed, and they hear nothing we're saying. We all know that the key to dealing with young people is listening to them, hearing them, respecting them, building their confidence. But at a certain point, things change, and they're no longer listening. What do we do in this desperate situation when we have somebody that we love? It might be our daughter, it might be a cousin, it might be a neighbor. What do we do? We're at wit's end.
I mean, the hardest part, I think, is initially you're frustrated, you're scared, so you react based off of those emotions. And honestly, it's the pointing the finger and you did this and you did that, right? Well, for a person in active addiction, you start pointing the finger, we shut down, we want to run. We don't hear anything you're saying after that because we're the victim. And that's what we do, we play the victim. So honestly, I know I had an intervention done on me. I went back in 2010, first time I went to treatment. And the biggest thing I found that made a difference in that situation was the interventionist in my family took it from a place of love and concern. It wasn't, you did this, you did that. It was like, look, we love you, we recognize there's a problem, and we want to help you. And they offered me a solution. They came to me and presented me with the option of going to a facility and had it all done and handled for me, right? And it was like, look, here you go. Like, we want you to get better. They wanted to see me well. And the way they delivered it to me, it was completely different than bashing me, breaking me down, telling me I'm nothing, right? I'm no good, which I had had that done to me prior, by my family because I hurt them. I stole from them. I lied. I cheated. I manipulated, but it was like even after all of that, when they actually came to me and just embraced me, for me, that made a difference. So.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions in the audience? And by the way, there's no right answer for everybody. Everybody's different. We have a microphone coming your way, ma'am.
This question is to Jessica also. I'm wondering what your recovery looked like, what type of facility you were admitted to, if it was the long-term, and if your family had to put up those expenses or if there's county money available.
Okay, so for me personally, I was very fortunate that I was still covered under my parents' insurance at the time, so I was very, very fortunate. And I went to a dual diagnosis treatment center, which means they not only dealt with the substance abuse, but the mental health piece as well, which was vital for me. Because, like I said, it wasn't my first go around at treatment. I ended up going to 2 inpatients, and I went to 7 different outpatient programs because I refused to go back to inpatient, and I had to do things my way. I was extremely stubborn. But this time for me made a difference was going into a facility that both were treated together. And I cannot express the importance of that enough. Because if you go into a center where it's just the substances addressed, there's a greater issue of the mental health flaring up. And it's what do I do in those situations when my mental health starts flaring up? I haven't learned any coping skills to deal with that situation. So we go back to what we know, and that's self-medicating. So it's extremely vital to deal with both issues at the same time. Now in regards to, and I did 60 days inpatient. I initially was signed up for 30 days. I made the choice while I was in treatment to extend and do longer, which was something I never did before. I actually started taking suggestions that were being given to me. And after that, the biggest thing, and treatment is the easy part. The inpatient treatment is easy, honestly. And that's what I tell a lot of the people I work with. Like, you're in a bubble, you're protected, you're safe. When you walk out the door and you are in, real world situation, you have outside triggers, you have stuff going on, that is when the real work starts. And so I'm a huge advocate for aftercare. I cannot express the importance of it enough. Like, you're in this bubble, you're protected, you don't have to worry about work or anything like that. When you leave, doing like a step down, so going from an inpatient setting to an outpatient setting, where you still have groups, you still have counseling, it's not as intense, but it's still there. And they gradually get reintroduced back to everyday living. But you still have those coping groups to go to and talk about what's happening, and then you gradually step down from that. And I also did 6 months in sober living as well. I didn't go right back to my environment. My environment was a trigger for me, and I knew that, but I was never willing to give that up because I knew going home I could manipulate and get what I wanted. So finally, this last time when I started taking recovery more seriously and I wanted to do things differently, I took those suggestions, and I did sober living, which for me was great. you know, because dealing with those outside triggers, like much like, you know, everybody had talked about, triggers are a big thing. Life still happens when you get clean. It doesn't go away, but it's about learning how to work through those problems as they arise.
I have a quick question on that. So what about the young person who says, I'm fine, I don't need to change my friends or my people, places, or things. I'm cool, I know what I'm doing. We know that doesn't work. You have to change your people, places, and things. Oh, yeah. What does that tell you about a young person that says, I'm cool, I got this under control? They're in denial.
They're in complete denial. Or we're stubborn. We like to tell ourselves we got this and I don't need help and I can handle it on my own, or the justification of it's not that bad. I did that for a long time. I'm just doing pills, right? And it's prescribed to me, so I'm not that bad. When it got to the point of injecting pills, it was, well, I'm not injecting heroin, so I'm not that bad. And then when I got to the point of heroin, I had kind of realized I ran out of things to say. Well, I'm not smoking crack, so I'm not that bad. Right? Like, it was always something else. Like, you can always latch on to anything to make it seem like it's not that bad. We minimize constantly. You know, you catch a charge. Oh, I had my car searched, leaving a motel that the officer was talking about. And it was, well, I didn't get arrested at that point in time, so I'm not that bad. And that's what was happening, though, is I kept getting away. I didn't have consequences. I never had consequences. Why would anyone stop what they're doing if they don't have consequences?
How many people do you know that have overdosed and died?
I don't even know. I mean, probably close to 7, 8 that I've actually been to funerals for.
We're finishing up here. I just have another announcement. We have another question. We love questions.
7 or 8. I mean, that I've been to funerals for. Now, people that I get on Facebook every day, and there's constantly a new RIP on Facebook every single day. You can't avoid it. It's in my face. You know, I mean, it's...
Jason Kokinos, how often is the police department responding to scenes for overdosing here in our county? Is this like once a month, once every few months?
Oh, no, like I said, we have documented, which means we know about, at least 200 a year. So sometimes, 200 a year, that's almost every day, right?
Right. And
just in Montgomery County.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the ultimate goal is to save the person who overdosed, try to get them resources and not arrest them, see who sold it to him, but get help for the person who used.
Yeah, so it's fighting a war on two fronts in a sense, right? If we can get people off the substance and help them, then we take away a customer of the greedy drug dealers. If we can target the greedy drug dealers, we can try to remove them from the community as well. So, but when it comes to users, that's where we don't want to put them in jail. People that need help, they're addicted to, they're a victim of this product, and that's what we need to try to help them with.
Since I've been here for about 2 hours, I've received 3 text messages from different mothers so far that need help with their addicted child since I've been in this room. In a moment, I'm going to ask each of our participants to close with about 15, 20 seconds of any comments they want. But in the meantime, I want to once again let you all know that if for students, faculty, and staff, we have multicultural diversity certificates that are available in the rear here with Mr. Watson and Ms. Johnson, as well as opportunities for social, SSL hours, and also all of you are winners, all of you are here, and all of you now have these more resources in your life. But some of you have something underneath of your chair that you may like and is a prize for you. So we'd like you to take this opportunity in this moment to see if you've won a prize, and as quietly as possible, be thankful for that. Now, as we begin to close, do we have other prizes too? Okay. Well, also, please don't forget, before you leave, please visit these resource tables. And as we conclude here, folks, I should have done this before. Yes. Okay. You guys, if you can stay with me for one more minute. Stay with me. Okay, last.
1 second. So, ladies and gentlemen, so it's not a gift under your seat. If you have an orange sticky note under your chair, then please see me afterwards.
Right. And also, please go visit our resource tables. All right, our last comments, Don Wood.
So the message for parents is denial. Denial can be deadly. Denial by the parents that anything could be happening with their child, and denial by the addict that they could possibly be addicted.
I believe that parents should start from early ages, understanding that mental health is important, And if your child needs mental health services, even from an early age, psychiatrists are not the bad guy. Like I'm a child psychiatrist, this is what we look like. And it's destigmatizing not just the process, but also helping the child so that they don't end up being triggered and then self-medicating with substances.
I would say biggest thing is I just want everyone to know that everyone in this room can make a difference in regards to what's going on. And, it is coming together as a community. And like, I remember Steve or you who said that we do have a problem here in Montgomery County. And I think everybody likes to think it's Montgomery County. It is an issue here. And by sweeping it under the rug and acting like we don't, it's killing people, in all honesty. People are dying. It's a very real thing. And so if you can or you're able, please get involved and do whatever you can to help. And like I said, I'm always here. If anybody needs anything, please, reach out.
I'll close with 2 quick points. One, lighter. I do not have an orange sticker under my seat.
That's my fault.
Checked. I'm not getting anything, but
We're going to get your speed camera ticket on the way out, though.
I've paid my share of speed camera tickets, I will admit. But on a serious note, though, I want everybody to understand that the police, no matter what you read about in the media and whatever everybody's personal beliefs are, we truly have the best interest in our hearts. We truly want to help people. We're not here to lock everybody up. We need your help to do it. We will never have enough staffing to tackle this problem. We're understaffed, budgetary issues, things of that nature. So we need your partnership. We need to be able to point us in the right direction, to go after the bad people and help the people that need help. And think of us just the same as you would the firefighter in this particular problem. We're here to help more than take people to jail. Thank you.
We want to thank Clemmy Solomon and everybody from Montgomery College. We want to thank Brittany Jones, but most importantly, we want to thank you all because you all are the stars and we need you to help us save lives. Speak up, save a life. You can do it, and we're here to support you. Thank you all. Drive safely.